Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Rudolf Rossa and I invite you to my presentation of our project THEaiTRE and specifically its first version, TH 1.0. So this will be a presentation about interactive generation of theater play scripts, and it's a joint work of many colleagues from several institutions. So, what's the motivation for the project? Well, 100 years ago, there was a theater play called RUR by Karel Čapek, which was the first theater play about robots and actually introduced the word robot. So, 100 years later, what we did is that we created a theater play called AI When a Robot Writes a Play, which is a first theater play which is written, well, from 90% by robots, or actually by artificial intelligence. So, how did we do that? Well, to be honest, it's mostly hacking of GPT-2, so it's rather an innovation project, not a heavy research project. And we built a web application for generating the play script, and then this application was used to generate a script. And this was actually performed on stage by professional actors. So let's first look at what we did with GPT-2 to be able to generate actual theater play scripts. So here we really used uh, just the existing GPT-2 XL model by OpenAI, provided by the Transformers library. And in this first version, we didn't fine tune it. So that's why I'm saying we're rather hacking it. So the base approach is to take the GPT-2 XL language model, which, if you know it, it works that way that you put in an input prompt, which is kind of a start of a document, and what it does is that it generates uh, a continuation of the document. So the base approach really is to put in something that looks like a start of a theater play, or actually a script for one scene in a theater play, such as this thing. So it introduces a setting and the characters, it sets the format. And when you let GPT to generate a continuation, so we figured out that it actually usually catches up with the format and the theme and everything, so that it does generate something that looks like a dialogue between the characters. And because we wanted to stage the play in Czech language, but GPT-2 is only available in English, so we actually employ a machine translation as a second step. Now, there is a number of issues that we encountered with this approach. So I'll start with the issues that we managed to resolve, more or less. And the first one is actually the set of characters. It seems that the model mostly catches up with the characters introduced in the input, but not always. It sometimes introduces new characters or forgets the old characters. So this is not very practical in terms of realizing such a theater play. So to tackle that, we actually hack into the GPT-2 model where it produces the probabilities of various tokens to generate, and we modify these probabilities directly so that when a new line is produced, it can be preceded only by a name of one of the characters from the input. Another issue that we encountered is that there is often some repetitiveness. So the generation would often keep generating identical lines again and again, sometimes even going into a kind of endless loop where we wouldn't be able to get out. So the obvious thing to do is actually to play with the repetition penalty, because that's one of the hyperparameters of GPT-2, and the default is 1.0. So if we increase it just a small bit, it penalizes the repetition of tokens. Actually, it's token based. So we realized that this value is rather good. If we increase it too much, then it means that the model basically avoids generating the same token again, which means you very quickly run out of basic verbs and conjunctions and articles. So that's very bad. And if you decrease it, so then you just keep getting the same lines and words all the time. And so this is using a hyperparameter of the model, but still we have kind of a backup solution in case this doesn't help. So if the repetition still does occur, we detect that, we discard that, and we just run the generation again to get a different variant. An important problem that we encountered is that the model is limited in its context. So it only sees 124 subwords, which means the input prompt and the so far generated output, but also this includes the space for generating new output. So this is good for short texts, but if you want to generate something longer, such as a theater play, then in the long distance there would be inconsistencies because the text gradually gets out of this context window. So still we are only generating individual scenes, but even then we have been able to generate scenes which cover several pages of text with keeping some long distance consistencies or coherencies. And the approach we used was actually to employ extractive summarization. So once the prompt plus the so far generated output gets too large, we run actually a modified text rank algorithm uh, to summarize basically the input and everything that has been generated into just 5 lines. So the algorithm tries to select the 5 most important lines that have been generated so far. And we keep only those plus the last 250 subwords so that there is as well the local consistency. And there were some minor machine translation issues that we managed to fix as well, but that's not very interesting. Now, the project is only in its half at this point, so we still plan to create a version 2.0 in 1 year. And there are some issues that we haven't resolved yet, but we are working on them and we have some plans to resolve them. And the most obvious one is that we are generating just individual scenes, and then these have to be put in order by a person. So we would like to actually generate a whole theater play at once. And the approach we intend to take is to generate that hierarchically. So GPT-2 doesn't look like it's ever going to be capable of generating something like a theater play, which is 50 pages long. That's just not what the model is very good for. So instead, we plan to first generate maybe just the title of the play, and then to kind of expand that into an outline of the play, which could be, I don't know, 10, 20, 50 sentences. So something within the limits of GPT-2. And then again, expand this into the individual scenes. So we plan to use, fine-tuned models at this point. So we plan to fine-tune the models and we plan to condition the models on the so far generated steps to generate the further steps. Uh, we often encounter problems with the character personalities because the model doesn't really uh, seem to understand that the names of the characters actually mean that each of the line is said by a different character and that different characters have different goals, different personalities, different, well, everything basically. So these get often mixed up and merged and so on. So we plan to employ character embeddings to kind of anchor the personalities of the individual characters. And we also want to look at character types that appear in theater plays and to cluster them into some basic types, basically. Um, and something that comes actually directly from the theater world is the concept of traumatic situations. So traditionally, uh, people that work with drama, with plays, playwrights, but other directors, they don't think in actual lines that the characters say, but they rather think in something called dramatic situations. So, for example, the intruder situation is when there is a kind of unwanted or unexpected person appearing. So, this can start by the person coming to the stage, and then it could take, like, I don't know, 10 or 20 lines where the characters deal with the situation, and then this typically ends and goes on to some other situation. So that's something that the theater experts on the team are really missing in the outputs, and it makes it much harder to actually stage the play. So we're working quite hard on trying to introduce that into the play. So we have a team annotating theater plays with a range of the dramatic situations, and the plan is then to train a machine learning model to detect the situations in existing theater scripts, and then to tune the generation process to actually generate the situations and not just dialogues. We'll see how this goes because obviously the data is scarce. And then there are still most of the machine translation issues we haven't addressed yet. So, for example, the gender, because in Czech language there is gender and politeness, which is not marked in English. And the machine translation system is sentence based at this point. So it just confuses everything and is not very consistent. So we plan to switch to document level translation and to fine tune it actually to the specific domain of theater play scripts. And we probably also need to employ some automatic post editing of the outputs. And then there is a lot of issues which are actually hard to define, but and we don't have a specific plan on how to resolve them. So that would be the aboutness. So what is the play about? And obviously, this is hard for people to tell what a play is about. So this is not marked in the data, so that's hard to learn. There is visual information missing. This is what we have been told, that when a playwright writes a play, then they imagine what is going on the stage, and they work with that in the script. But our tool does not have this kind of information, so it cannot reason based on this kind of visual information. And what's also important in theater plays is working with subtext. So actually, often the most important things are not explicitly said in the lines, but they are somewhere behind the lines. So that's obviously something very hard to work with when it's not overt in the data we have. So these last issues, we don't think we will be actually able to solve them within the project, but we at least want to think about them. So now let me show a demo of the application that we actually built. So it's just basically a wrapper of the model that I just introduced. And this was used to generate the script of the theater play. So let me show you how to use THEaiTRE. we'll add a new scene. I'll call it the master's death. And I will copy paste some input. It's the morning. Robot enters the room of his master. He's real old and sick. Robot sees that his master is not doing very well this morning. He sits at the edge of his bed and takes his hand. Robot: I remember how you jumped on this bed when you were little. You were full of beans. Master: we both know I am dying. So I submitted. So now THEaiTRE robot tool gets this input text, and the GPT-2 model hidden in it starts generating a continuation of this text. It all takes like half a minute, so I'll skip forward a bit, and we get the result. So we can see the input that we entered, and we can see a continuation generated by the model. Okay, it starts to read about some killing. Interesting. And you can also see that it gets automatically translated to Czech language by a machine translation system. Now, the user has several options. One option is that if the user likes what is generated, so they can simply click continue, and well, it always generates 10 lines, so, and then stops. So if you're clicking continue, it will generate another 10 lines. And here is some further output. So scene now goes on. So we have now 20 lines in the scene. And again, if we like it, we can just continue. If we don't like it, we have further options. Maybe we don't like what was generated. So let's see, we like the first 3 lines, but not the continuation. So we can click the X here, and the text from here on gets deleted, and another option is generated by the model. And so this is the output, and the first 3 lines are kept, and the 4th line, now that's a new continuation. And this is version where repetition is not strictly forbidden, so sometimes the model keeps repeating itself. So maybe we can use the 3rd option, which is to manually enter some input when we feel that we need to push the model in a different direction. So let's see what the model now generates. So we do see what we saw before. And now there is the line that we entered. So it's colored gray, similar to the prompt, so that we know that this is manually entered. And the model now picks up the input with this line, and this pushes the generation in another direction. And that's basically everything. So that was a demo. So let me now let's look at how this was used in actually producing the script of the theater play. So this basically had 2 stages. One was generating individual scenes using the tool that you've just seen, and the second one was then post-processing the script after taking it out of the tool. So the first step, this was the THEaiTRE robot tool that you've just seen, operated by a theater dramaturge. And so the interventions that were made were that the input prompts were provided by the operator, and then the operator had the options to choose a different variant at some points or to manually add a line into the script. In the post-processing stage, uh, there were a lot of deletions where just some parts of the scripts were deleted, some small edits to improve some places that would be hard to perform. And then a lot of actually fixes were errors in the automated translation. So this was more than the fixes of GPT-2. So to put it in some numbers, so actually more scenes were generated and then only some were selected for the performance. And then about 2% of the script are the input prompts that were entered manually. And further 1% of the scripts or other lines that were manually added. For about 8% of the generated lines, a different variant was chosen. So by clicking the red X button. And then in the post processing, about 15% of the lines were deleted. And for about 1/3 of the lines, actually, there were some small edits, but in terms of words, so only about 8% of words were edited in this way. In fixing the errors in automated translation, I said this was more, so that's about 20% of the words in the Czech version of the script are actually post-edited because, as I explained, there's still a lot of errors in the machine translation. So this is some kind of analysis that should show how much actually human intervention was used. And because we like to have one number to present, so we decided to have the number of 90% of the scripts coming from GPT-2, which means that about 10% of the script was written manually in some way. So because these were the input prompts, or because these were manually edited lines, or because these were edited lines, edited words in the script. And if we would talk about the Czech version of the script, so obviously this would be somewhat more. It's good to say that the THEaiTRE experts on the team explained that this is actually reasonable, or actually quite a small amount of intervention, and that they would, even with a human written script, they would do a similar amount of interventions. So even if there is a human author, so typically the play is not performed 100% according to the script. And then, well, the last step was staging the play in a theater. So we had at our disposal only the dialogues in the script, which were generated, but everything else was actually had to be done manually. So the stage directions, the scene design, the music, the costumes, so all of that. So we didn't even attempt to produce this stuff. We just focused on generating the dialogues. And this was really done by a professional theater team. So a theater director, dramaturgists, actors, other professionals. And this thing premiered online a month ago. And it had several thousands of views. And we plan to have live performances once this is possible. So as the final thing, I want to show you a small excerpt from the play.
Nevěděl jsem, že jsem schopen těchto pocitů. Ale miluji vaše lesklé křivky. Miluji tě.
Je mi líto, ale já nejsem robot, to je jenom kostým.
Prosím, Už brzo umřu. Už brzo umřu. To bylo velmi dobré obětí. No, užil jsem si to. Skvělý čas. Víš, musím tě toho tolik naučit. Bude mi trvat hodně dlouho, než to vysvětlím. Chci si koupit auto. Ano, to můžeš. Co mám teď dělat? Začni hledat nějaké dobré auto. O autech nic nevím. To nevadí. Naučíme tě ty správné věci. Co mám teď dělat? Začni hledat nějakou dobrou práci. To nezní moc dobře. Já jsem vysokoškolák. A zdá se, že jsi velmi negativní. Až všichni zemřete, až bude tvá rodina mrtvá. Až všichni zemřete, až bude tvá rodina mrtvá, až všichni zemřete, až budou tvoje vnoučata mrtvá, až budou tvoje děti mrtvé, až budou tvoje děti mrtvé, až budou tvoje... Bože, to je strašné, co si zač? Já jsem prezident Spojených států.
Okay, that was part of the excerpt. There is a longer version available on YouTube. And so this is the whole team of the project. So as I said, it's a collaboration of multiple institutions, of a lot of people. And that's everything from me, actually. So I've presented our THEaiTRE project in its first version, where we hacked GPT-2, built a web application, and generated a theater play script, and actually managed to put the play on stage. So thank you for your attention.